everything in school is teaching us. It's not just the curriculum that's teaching us, but it's also all the spaces in between, all the assumptions. And for some kids, it might teach us how to be a doctor. But for other kids, it might teach them that they're worth nothing. Yeah. Those are both lessons that you can draw from school. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of tease out that complexity. But one of the things that happened in the process of writing it was that the argument around assessment and exams became inescapable.
You're listening to Leading With Podcast. We've got an exciting show in store for you today. So my name is Sam Denno and I am the secondary English lead at Twinkl. Today's guest has a secondary school flavour. He's a secondary head teacher working in the Northeast, and his book, Examination, published last year to much fanfare. I've got in the script. Does that sound?
I'll take that.
Much fanfare, appeared to be about the function of GCSEs, but I say appeared because it was about much more than that, churning out implications up and down the key stages. I'm not sure. Churning out is also in my script. I'm not sure if that's...
Yeah, I mean, I think the book might be against churning.
He is, of course, educator and author Sammy Wright. Welcome to the show, Sammy.
Thank you for having me.
Can we just, again, this is all scripted, but can we just begin with the small matter of your first name?
Yes.
Which, so I was a Sammy. When I was about 7, I think, my mum said to me, "Do you want to be a Sam or a Sammy?" And I said, "No brainer, Sammy." And so I became a Sammy until I think it was about year 8. My memory is year 8, and it's a distinct memory of a girl Sammy coming up to me in the schoolyard and saying, "Well, Sammy's a girl's name.
Yeah.
Why are you called that?" At which point I ditched Sammy and became a Sam.
And you've regretted it ever since.
Yeah. So what's your history?
My history is, I think, probably classic sibling contrariness. That my brother was Jacob, and we were Sammy and Jakey. And at a certain point, he was like, "Jakey's for kids. I'm going to be Jacob." And I was like, "Well, I'm not going to change."
Okay.
So I just stuck with it.
Your book, though, your book Examination, which is here. Examination. Wonderful book. I'll pop it down. I picked it up thinking that I would be reading a technical academic study on the use of assessment in English schools, but I didn't get that at all. Instead, I got an incisive social commentary, and actually it broke my heart over and over again, some of the stories, some of the anecdotes, and I came out the other end feeling changed and actually totally convinced by your proposals for education. Can you talk us through the book and describe what you're aiming to achieve and well, what you said in the book?
Well, I mean, that sounds like a perfect thing that I would love to have said I set out to achieve that. That's great, very kind of you to say so. What I wanted to do, originally the working title was Schooled, because I wanted to say what school does. And that was the thing, is that I've always felt that the ways we talk about school are, they are very narrow windows onto a very wide and complex picture. And I think that that's all very well to say, because there's lots of things you could say that about, but the point is that with school, people think they know more about it than they actually do. And there's a lot of stuff that's in the political domain and in the newspapers and so on, which talks about schools in ways that assume we all know what schools are. And this is what they're doing, and look at these results, and look at this, and feral teens and this and that. And I just felt that there wasn't anything really out there which said, this is the texture of it. not just what is the outcome, what is the texture of it.
Love it. Yeah.
And the kind of core question that runs through the book is what is school for? What's the point of it? And I think that's the, when I say the texture of it, the thing I also wanted to get at was the idea that everything in school is teaching us. It's not just the curriculum that's teaching us, but it's also all the spaces in between, all the assumptions. And for some kids, it might teach us how to be a doctor. But for other kids, it might teach them that they're worth nothing.
Yeah.
Those are both lessons that you can draw from school.
Yeah. So
I wanted to kind of tease out that complexity. But one of the things that happened in the process of writing it was that the argument around assessment and exams became inescapable.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that the pitch of it was much more general, but as I wrote it, it became the case that I felt like the exam system, the assessment system, had become this this distorting influence across the whole piece.
Interesting.
So it became much more central as I went.
Yeah. Yeah. And therefore, did it become almost sort of imperative then, I suppose, to be talking about assessment?
Yeah, and I think the other thing I should say probably is that the thing I started with, and the thing that's been a real obsession of mine for a number of years now, is disadvantage and the complex nature of different types of disadvantage and different places of disadvantage. And that's the work I did when I was on the Social Mobility Commission.
Yeah.
It was from 2018 to 2021.
The DFE,
yeah.
Social Mobility Commission.
Yeah. And so when I was there, I was very much involved in things like responding to the DFE's cancellation of exams and how we dealt with the lockdowns and so on in schools.
Yes.
So all of that had led me to a point where I really, really felt that there were a lot of half-truths around the impact of socioeconomic groupings and background on education, and that we were not really addressing this kind of elephant in the room. So that then also leads into why examinations are so central, because examinations are what throw that disadvantage into sharp relief.
Yeah.
Where it suddenly comes and breaks above the surface, and you can see in really stark terms the nature of it and the extent of it.
Yeah. Would you be willing to sort of go into, so in the final chapter you list quite a number of sort of suggested changes, which of course we want people to read the book, which came out in paperback in September. So I'm asking for one or two spoilers. What are the headlines?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to spoil it, because what I will say is it's all about the process, not the end point.
Okay,
and that is one of my learnings
you're
about
proper
about
true
school.
English teacher.
Yeah, exactly. So even though I'll tell you the end, it's still worth reading the book. Now, the message that I want to give about education is that, and again, this is an English teacher's message, story matters. So the way I phrase the conclusions of the book, I phrase them around the idea of narratives that we need to tell. What I wanted to do was think about how if we change those big stories, then that changes the imperatives in the whole system, and that changes the way we see the whole system, and it then will allow the system to grow in new ways. So the 5 stories that I think we need to tell, the 5 new narratives that I think that we need about education, they're all about how we kind of shift perception.
Yeah. Okay.
So I say, let's make sure I get these right. I think we need to say that there's no place for markets in education. The idea of a market in education doesn't work. Obviously I'm saying this in a corporate environment. It can work in terms of a resource.
We're championing important voices.
No, but joking aside, like you can absolutely market different educational resources, but what you can't market is different kids. You can't say, right, this kid's going to go there and this kid's going to go there, and the market will decide which one has a better life. Yeah, that's not fair. No. Because ultimately all market forces in terms of school choice, which is essentially what I'm talking about here, they're not school choice on behalf of children, they're parental choice. And essentially what you're saying is, by having school choice, by having a marketized system of schools that compete against each other for the attention of parents, what you're saying is you're creating a mechanism for embedding generational privilege. You're saying the state of the parents is the thing which is going to determine the education of the child. And that seems to me deeply inequitable. So I think that we have to change that story about education. It's not about schools competing against each other. It has to be about schools collaborating and coverage that actually is in the interests of children. So that's one new narrative. I think we need to have a narrative where we say that knowledge is for everyone, right? Because at the moment what we have is a system whereby we effectively say, the academic knowledge is something that all children should strive for and attempt to attain through highly academic qualifications, and then if they fail at that, then they can try the vocational ones. So the knowledge that we're imparting in schools, the understanding of the world, the connection with art and culture, those are things that everyone has a right to, whether you're academic or not.
Yeah.
So I think the way we impart those shouldn't be structured in terms of like a rigid academic hierarchy, so that if you're good at reading, then you deserve more books. Everyone deserves books, right? If you're good at history, then you deserve to know more history. Everyone should know history. So what we should do is we should have a general certificate of secondary education, a GCSE, that's actually designed around the needs of everyone. My other narratives, I'll kind of rattle through them quickly. I'll just say that I think that it's important that we say that school should be for everyone, no matter whether they have special educational needs or if they are, if they've struggled with behaviour. And I think the core message of that narrative we need to tell is that we can't be a culture which says no exclusions. I really hate it when people use that phrase, because that implies that there's no behaviour that's outside the pale. And I think any school leader would say sometimes you just have to say this person should not be in this school. But equally, that doesn't mean that person then doesn't deserve a school. They need a different school. They need an alternate provision or another school to go back into. What happens at the moment is we have this toxic combination of fretting about numbers and percentages with exclusions, but they're not really paying attention to what happens to the kids afterwards. The people who are saying, that they want education to be inclusive, and I count myself as one of them, we need to be making the case for fantastic alternate provision, for really high quality places that will provide an education even when a child has kind of hit some really, really serious behaviours that mean that they have to leave their school. Well, I'll finish with the last one, which is just that we have to judge schools in a different way. We can't judge them in terms of this very, very divisive and simple ranking that Ofsted provide. We get so caught up on the idea that everything has to be measured with a grade, and we lose sight of the fact that it is possible to assess without aiming for a spurious objectivity on it. And when it comes to schools, just as when it comes to kids, frankly, I think we can't possibly say this school's around the level of that school, or there's an equivalence between this bit of excellence and that bit of excellence. We have to find a way and a language with which we can say these schools are excellent institutions in different ways. They provide different things to different people. And equally, these schools are problematic institutions in different ways. These are the specific things that we need to address.
Yeah. And you're not sitting there in a room somewhere blogging away and sort of putting this out there. And you've got an interest to protect here, which is actually you're working within the system. You're working as a head teacher. So obviously you are saying sort of some fairly. What shouldn't be radical, making what shouldn't be radical statements, but sort of the whole idea of a sort of equitable education system actually is sort of relatively, you saying it in such a public way is relatively radical, isn't it? What do you feel as though you sort of have to protect your own interests at all?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting position. I would say, it's important to clarify, my role, I'm a head of school and I work closely with an exec head teacher. So, one of the things that's been very important to me is how supportive she's been of the kind of the fact that I have this kind of public face. I think that I try quite carefully to divide what I say between the general and the particular. So I do sometimes get asked to kind of comment on things specifically within the school, but I'm quite reluctant to do that because it seems to me that isn't the point. And actually, there have been occasions when there've been kind of profiles in media or things like this where they've talked about me as if, he's doing these great things. And I always want to kind of go back and say, no, I really am not. I'm quite average. I don't think that there's anything, I love our school. I think we're doing really well and we collectively are doing well, but it's not like I'm this kind of maverick, sitting there going, let's do things differently in the school. We run quite a conventional school
Okay.
and we do it in the best interest of the kids. But my reasoned response is that as a sector, we need to get much better with saying we're not doing it perfectly. We need to be able to talk about our schools not just in terms of, well, we got outstanding the other day and, brilliant results and this, that, and we're doing this and we're doing that, which is a conversation you can get sucked into and become much more comfortable in saying, God, well, I'll tell you what, we've really struggled this year with attendance of this group. Have you got any ideas? Because we can't all be perfect.
Yeah. And when you wrote that in the book, it made me cry because I thought, I wish I worked for him.
You say that now.
Yeah. But yeah, so and there's so much a culture of that, but in schools, isn't there? That actually you're always sort of aiming for, striving for perfection, striving for that outstanding lesson review, or kind of to be sort of well perceived of as kind of always head above water, when actually a lot of our teachers' heads are not above water.
Yeah. This is one thing where I will say one thing about what we've done as a school, and it's something I'm proud of this year. It's just a really simple thing. It's just about messaging, and it was just about the fact that we changed the appraisal system to say that we don't want you to have individual targets, we've got collective targets. And that when we're doing that, no one's going to be failed because of their class. What we're doing is we're saying we're like mountaineers. We're all clipped in together.
That's lovely.
And actually all of us are collectively trying to do something.
Yeah.
And if someone's slipping, then we'll just help them.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, oh, look at your progress in that class, that's no good.
Yeah.
If there's a problem, let's step in and help.
Yeah.
Let's clip in.
Which goes with your idea of sort of school as community as well, doesn't it? That we're all part of that community. We're all helping each other. You're very honest in your book in describing your own middle class background and your own sort of privileged education. What do you think motivates you to work in this sort of disadvantaged setting and advocate for young people with disadvantages or just like a comprehensive school in the way that you do?
I suppose one thing I would say is the school I'm in has there's areas of deep disadvantage. There's also areas where the very privileged kids there as well, and there's a mix, there's a complexity to every school, I think. I do have this deep interest in disadvantage because I think it's a kind of combination of not quite guilt, because I don't feel guilty, but awareness of my own luck. I got a scholarship to a private school, and that was great. I had some really good teachers there. But actually, the greatest privilege I had was parents who read. Parents who gave me books to read.
Yeah.
Perhaps parents who didn't let me watch Masters of the Universe on loop, it being the 80s.
Your boys are at home gaming tonight.
That's right, yes, yes. It's a new world. They read as well. I do that terrible thing where I say to my son he can only buy a new game if he's finished his book. So it's a book game. Which is exactly what I would advocate against. But I'm being honest and I'm owning my own frailties. No, but I think that reading was the greatest privilege. And I think that the reason I have such an interest in disadvantage is I think because I find it constantly shocking, the difference in people's lives. I really find it quite frightening the way disadvantage impacts on outcome and impacts on experience. I remember, first being aware of, the patterns of different achievement for different groups of students and thinking, oh, this is really interesting. Here's some numbers that make sense to me. And then as I, was involved in research for the Social Mobility Commission, and as I looked deeper myself, I saw more and more the fact that it's about individual circumstances, and it's about patterns in the community, and it's about complex relations of history and economics and place and politics. And you go to a place like Sunderland, and you can see two different opposing forces at play there. You can see the pride of a community that is cohesive and has a sense of identity and self. Mm-hmm. And then equally, the fact that in our world that we've created, that can be something that can hold one back as well. Mm. And I think the tension between those forces of place and identity holding you in, keeping you safe, but also keeping you at home and keeping you away from opportunity. I find that really, really difficult to reconcile. And I think one of the impulses we often have is to kind of have a vision of what we think school is or what we think society is and go, well, that's how it should be. Mm. Not for any particular reason, but just because that's how it should be. And one of my favourite anecdotes on that is that in the 40s, there was a bunch of men in suits in Whitehall, probably smoking pipes, who sat down to decide on the funding formula for universities and thought about how many people should go to university. And they literally plucked a figure out of the air and they said, oh, this is probably about 3%, I think. That's the people who are clever enough to go to university. And then, 40 years later, Tony Blair similarly, arbitrarily, plucks a figure of 50% out. Yeah. And we can fight between those poles, but we have to recognize on some level that both are fluid and arbitrary markers. Yeah. There isn't a natural state of how many people achieve, how many people have this job, it's fluid. And I think the thing that's very, very difficult when we look at these questions nowadays, a lot of the debate around education centres around the idea of 21st century skills. How do we move forward? How do we teach kids for jobs that don't even exist yet? Mm. I think it's actually a much bigger problem than that. Mm. It's how do we build a society when we don't even know what society will work? Mm.
So it's now about a year since it was published and since the examination was published, and quite a lot has happened. You were clearly writing it under the Conservative government based on some of the name checks. We've had regime change. We're a long way into the Becky Francis review. Has any of this or have any other changes or advancements altered the message of your book?
When the Francis review was announced, with the rubric around evolution, not revolution, I was very sympathetic to that because I had in my mind what I thought that meant. But as time has gone on, I have actually ended up believing even more strongly in the need for a revolutionary change in education, because I can see how evolution can just lead us to a blind alley. Evolution in and of itself, Dawkins calls it the blind watchmaker. It is blind. And actually, I think in this instance, we need to have a notion of what the goal is. I do think we need to go slowly. And I say that in the book. I think educational reform, the massive mistake of the last round of reforms from Gove was the speed of them. Actually, some of the things that he did, as I say in the book, I'm an agnostic about some of the stuff, but what was damaging was the speed. And I think that what we need to do is take a decade to plan and institute some real deeply thought out stuff. We shouldn't rush it. We should make sure we're doing it in a sustainable way that isn't going to break the profession, that is going to allow schools to adapt and change. But we do need to have a clear vision of what education is for, because otherwise what we can end up doing is simply entrenching patterns that have been destructive.
Yeah. And so that could look like a group that sits outside of sort of regime change and enacts kind of education as you say, that sort of revolution in an evolutionary way. Yeah. How urgent do you think the message of the book is then on that basis? Is it a bit of a now or never moment, or is this something that we can keep on struggling with and wrestling with?
I think the now or never is we've got to have the conversation and we've got to set the goal. All right? I think the thing that nothing stands still. If we don't put the marker down and say this is what we want, then things start happening anyway. Right? You put the marker down and you say this is what we're working towards, and the nature of the sector is everyone will start focusing on that. You need to give the focal point so that we know what we're doing. And we need to do the careful thinking around that so that we know it's going to be something that will last for decades, not just for a few years. Yeah. But in terms of doing the stuff, no, it's not now or never, because actually one of the things that I hope I do say in the book and in anything that I'm saying in the media, it is important to say that we've made a lot of progress, that schools are in a good state, that I'm proud of a lot of the stuff that my schools got in place. And I think that I know we're better than we were 10 years ago, and I think many schools feel the same. So I think that is, we can't be all doom and gloom about it. There's a lot of expertise, there's a lot of learning and growing. It's just we've got to make sure that is now moving in the right direction as we go forward.
Yes. Have you seen any positive changes then since the book was published?
Yes, I think actually, and it's really interesting how it's been perceived, but I think that the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill is excellent. It's not perfect, nothing perfect, but a lot of the furore around it was, large academy chains protesting against the reduction of academy freedoms, when actually, I think there's a lot of self-interest going on there. So what I mean by that is that obviously you've got a national picture in which roles are falling. Competition is going to increase. We have quite a harsh environment coming up over the next few years. What the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill does is it actually gives councils more capacity to assign places at their need, rather than simply relying on the markets between schools. Yeah. And that control from a body that has a kind of overview and an objectivity and isn't driven by the business imperatives that often take over academies, that is, I think, a really positive thing. As is the homeschool register, various things like that. But I am really interested in how negatively it's been received. And I would say as well, it's important for me to say I am by no means anti-academy. I think, we're an academy. I like academies. I think, it's a structure, fine. But I think the problem comes when the structures start to drive what you're doing with kids. And I think the problem with the academy structure is when it's allowed to become too much of a market-based competition. So you need something to leaven that, and that's what that bill does, I think.
Yeah. Do you take any credit for that yourself? Do you think they've been reading my book?
So, I do know that Bridget Phillipson's read the book. I know that Kevin Collins has read the book. So I hope on some level it has filtered in. There was a speech at the Confederation of School Trusts, I think it was, by Bridget Phillipson, that I was really, really pleased to hear, because it chimed with a lot of things that I believe. But I am not going to be arrogant enough to say that I'm the only person who said these things, because a lot of the things I say I think are fairly widely thought in the sector.
Yeah.
And I think that, one thing I like about Bridget Phillipson is she has listened very, very widely to a lot of people. I'm glad that she's read my book, but I'm also glad that she's not just relying on my book, because I think that would be foolish, because I'm just someone who sat down and written about this, And I actually, again, one of the things I say in it is I have felt the privilege of being allowed to pontificate without accountability in it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to have the space to do that, but I think it's also important that no one just takes that and thinks that's a blueprint. Any idea in there, please, if you're going to do it, make sure you knock it around a bit first.
Yeah. And I suppose the interesting thing with the Francis review is that they are suggesting that they're taking a lot of evidence and knocking it around. So and presumably Becky Francis has read your book as well. Can we assume that?
I don't know. But what? John Hutchinson has.
Okay, great. Yeah, so what did Bridget Phillipson think? Did she give you a review?
I mean, she said she loved it, but she's a politician, so I'm not going to read too much into that. I think that also I'm almost a constituent, so
Okay.
Sweet. No, I will say as well about the Francis review, I really like the way they've gone about it. I think they are good people on there. I'm a fan of the makeup. I'm a fan of the approach. My only criticism is just, and I think this is also about how the scope has been defined. I just wish that we had something that would then come out of it saying this is the big long-term goal, right? And it is entirely possible that the review will come out with conclusions that say we need a proper long-term plan.
Yeah.
I don't think they will produce the plan because that's not in their scope, but they may well say we need it.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, please do that.
Yeah, and nothing's been ruled out yet. Yeah. I think you're working on another book.
Yes.
Are you allowed to tell us anything about it?
I think so. I don't really know. It's quite long term. It's going to be a few years because what I'm trying to do is really embed myself in the lives of children and kind of explore how they are experiencing the world and how that impacts on school.
Okay. So
I think that what I hope from it, one of the things about examination is I really, really wanted to speak to a wide audience, and I hope that I do. And lots of people who've read it have said very nicely that it is accessible and broad and so on and what it says. But with the new one, what I want to do is take the same approach and speak to a more broader sense of how we educate our children, as parents as well as educators and as a society, frankly. So it's a broad lens. And it's going to take a little while.
Okay. So similar format.
Yeah, lots of interviews with kids.
Lots of young people.
What I will say is the reason it's going to take a while is because I'm going to, some of the young people I'm working with, I'm going to be working with for 3 or 4 years. So it's going to be about seeing their growth and their progress.
Do you like Richard Linklater?
I love Richard Linklater.
Okay.
I love Richard Linklater. I love 7-Up. I love Child of the Millennium. All those things. Basically, my approach to books is I want to play. I want to do the things that I want to do. And the thought of being able to spend a bit of time actually following children and seeing how they develop and seeing how they change and applying a different lens. I think a teacher's lens is a different one to other people. And I think that's something I want to kind of continue from examination, is the idea of looking at the world from the perspective of the teacher.
Yeah.
Because teachers are great.
Yeah.
Not personally speaking, but us as a collective, we're great.
That's been really, really stimulating stuff, Sammy. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for all your honesty, and thanks again for your book. I think it's a wonderful read, and I think the audience should go out and read it if they've not done already. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.